Here is a rundown on Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent breaks down Trump's tariff plan and its impact on the middle class, featuring Scott Bessent by Tucker Carlson. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, sat down with Tucker Carlson to discuss President Trump's newly announced tariff plan and its potential impact on the middle class.
Bessent believes that this plan is transformational for the American economy and will benefit American workers. He notes that the president has been talking about this for decades, and that it's a combination of old and new ideas. Bessent also mentions that Alexander Hamilton was the original tariff man and used tariffs to fund the new nation and protect American industry. Bessent thinks that the president's plan is not unlike Ronald Reagan's policies in the 1980s, which were also met with initial resistance, but ultimately led to a period of economic growth. He notes that the president is using tariffs to negotiate with other countries and to protect American industry. Bessent also believes that the tariffs will lead to a reindustrialization of the U.S. economy and that the country will start making things again, including medicines, semiconductors, and ships.
Tucker Carlson asks Bessent if he thinks that the stock market is a fair measure of the economy's health.
Bessent responds that the market goes up and down, but in the long run, it's a weighing machine that will reflect the quality of the country's policies. Bessent also discusses the potential impact of the tariffs on the U.S. government's revenue. He notes that the tariff income can be substantial and that it can be used to fund government programs and reduce the deficit. He also mentions that the president's plan is to use the tariff income to bring down the government deficit and keep taxes low.
Tucker Carlson asks Bessent if he thinks that the U.S. has the necessary labor force for the transition to a more manufacturing-based economy. He also notes that the president's plan is to relever the private sector and unleash its potential.
Bessent also discusses the potential impact of the tariffs on foreign governments and companies. He notes that the president's decision will be final, and that companies will have to decide whether to build their factories in the U.S. or pay the tariffs. He also mentions that the Treasury Department is working to help companies make that decision by providing incentives such as low taxes and full depreciation. Bessent discusses how China will respond to the tariffs. He notes that China's business model is highly unbalanced and that the country is in a weaker position due to its trade surplus. He believes that China may not be able to retaliate effectively and that the U.S. is in a stronger position. He thinks that China will have to rebalance its economy and consume more, while the U.S. will consume less and manufacture more. This could lead to a more level playing field between the two countries. Bessent compares the situation to a famous scenario where a bank loan is taken and the bank is in charge, but if the loan is big enough, the borrower is in charge of the bank. He believes that China needs the U.S. market to survive and that the U.S. has the upper hand in the trade negotiations. Bessent also discusses the European economy, noting that Germany has an imbalanced export economy and that they're going to have to rebalance too. He mentions that the Europeans are going to have to make some tough decisions, but he's confident that they'll come around. The conversation turns to the impact of the tariffs on the middle class, and Bessent notes that the previous system wasn't working for them. He believes that the tariffs will lead to a more level playing field and that the middle class will benefit from it. He also mentions that the Democrats' strategy of compensating the losers isn't the right approach, as it's not about handouts, but about creating good jobs and opportunities. Bessent shares a personal anecdote about growing up in a middle-class family and seeing the impact of economic insecurity. He notes that he's seen both sides of the economic spectrum and that he's committed to fixing the system.
Tucker Carlson asks Bessent about his worries as Treasury Secretary, and he responds that he's concerned about the risk of another outbreak similar to COVID, a kinetic war, and the impact of geopolitical events on the economy. He also worries about the debt and the need to make smart cuts and focus on waste, fraud, and abuse.
Bessent discusses his job as a bond salesman, selling America's debt to the world, and notes that his pitch is changing after the recent events. He believes that the U.S. is setting the sails for a better fiscal time and that people don't have to worry about the U.S. defaulting. He also mentions that he's working to make the government more efficient and that he's inspired by the example of Florida, which has a lower budget and no income tax.
Tucker Carlson asks Bessent about Elon Musk's involvement in the administration, and he responds that Musk's imprint will be with the country for a long time.
He also notes that the mainstream media has tried to demonize Doge and the people who work with him, but he's confident that they're doing a great job. The conversation turns to the topic of cryptocurrency, and Bessent notes that the current system is broken and the cryptocurrency could be an alternative. He mentions that Donald Trump has created the Crypto Advisory Council and signed an executive order to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which could give normal people an alternative to the government's failing system. Bessent emphasized that the Federal Reserve should focus solely on monetary policy, rather than getting involved in other areas such as climate change and diversity, equity, and inclusion. He believes that this would make the Fed more vulnerable and impinge on its ability to effectively manage the economy. Bessent also touched on the topic of gold, explaining that it's still widely regarded as a reliable store of value globally. He noted that gold has a lot of history behind it and is not susceptible to fiscal problems or budget deficits. Bessent even referred to himself as a gold bug in the past, showing his appreciation for the precious metal. The conversation then shifted to Bessent's interactions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Bessent was tasked with leading the economic agreement that was part of Trump's peace plan, which aimed to make the U.S. and Ukraine partners and show the American people that they have an economic stake in the region. However, the deal ultimately fell through, and Bessent expressed his hope that it could still be signed in the future. Bessent also addressed the issue of auditing the billions of dollars sent to Ukraine, stating that he prefers to look forward rather than dwelling on the past. He also reassured potential bond buyers and investors that the administration has a strong dollar policy and is working to ensure the dollar remains strong over the long run.
In a surprising turn of events, Tucker Carlson revealed that YouTube is suppressing his show, limiting the dissemination of information to the public. He encouraged viewers to subscribe to his channel and share the video to get around this suppression and access true news and information. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, and just remember, subscription is only £1 or $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening.